the market is volatile, probably
Yeah.
as much, if not more so than what we saw in 2020, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, and really, if you want to look at the whole picture, the last 3 years, 4 years have been crazy for the talent acquisition space.
Yeah.
How do you think recruiters can determine if fractional recruiting or more of this kind of like embedded model is the right fit for them? I know there's a lot of recruiters and talent acquisition folks who are going out on their own. They're considering kind of making that jump. But there's different types, right? You got the
Yeah.
standard search model, you got executive search, you got staffing, you got all these other subsets within agency recruiting. And I think whether or not you wear the title, this is a form of agency recruiting. It's just in a customized and unique way that you've packaged
Yes.
together. So,
Yep.
how do you think recruiters can determine if this is a good model for them? And if not, I mean, what other options do you see out there for people today?
Sure. So, I think a lot of recruiters, especially internal recruiters, they feel somewhat safe in that space. I think there's a perception that there's a certain amount of stability and
Mhm.
also not necessarily a need to engage in business development.
Yeah.
The way that you might in an agency environment, and I think that's one thing that really draws a lot of people to working internally. In addition to perhaps being um, uh, that having that same sense that I did around really wanting to be able to connect to mission, vision, and values. Um, but if I've learned anything in the course of my career, which is quite long at this point, I've been out in the professional world for 20 years at this point, and so I lived through
Wow.
'08 and '09,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then I lived through 2020,
yeah.
and so I've been through 4 RIFs in the course of my
Wow.
career, um, and I have no illusions of stability anymore. And if anything, I actually feel as though I have significantly more stability now than I did when I was internal, because when I was internal, and I think generally most people when they work internally, all of their eggs are in one basket. And if they're impacted by a riff, like that's it.
Mhm.
Unless they've already got a really good, really strong side hustle going, right? Which is increasingly common these days. So, I think we have to really abandon ourselves of our old ways of thinking around how we achieve some semblance of stability in our careers. On the same token, though, you have to have a degree of comfort with volatility, with ambiguity, and just not knowing how long an engagement may ultimately be, when the next engagement might come to fruition. I think you have to be fairly disciplined with, as a steward of your money in order to ensure that you can weather periods of slow business, that sort of thing. So
Mm.
I think there's certainly a lot of considerations, but I think that this model is a much better fit for far more people than realize it.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Follow-up question on this because I think it's interesting, and I actually really enjoy the fractional model as an internal head of talent because I think,
Yeah.
especially in the startup space, sometimes hiring cycles change on a dime, or your headcount plan shifts
Yeah.
suddenly, and you don't always have the resources to allocate and things of that nature. So having a fractional partner seems to work really well, at least in the startup space.
Yeah.
Um, from a financial standpoint and from like just a perspective of scaling, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like the idea of the agency, the overall kind of standard agency recruitment model, because you can make a good amount of money on a placement, right?
Sure. Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
in
Right.
this model, obviously it's more hourly, it's a little bit more like you said on a contract basis and for a specified timeline. um, how do you see how have you seen yourself scale and grow this over
Yeah,
time? And how do you see that playing out for someone who, maybe sees that as a barrier?
sure. So that's an interesting question because I actually don't only work on an hourly
Okay.
basis. That is one service offering that I have for clients. where I call it time and talent, and I literally just bill out per hour.
Yeah.
And there is an opportunity, I think, as well. Sometimes my contract is written with an hourly minimum, and I've also written a contract once that had an hourly maximum. So that is one particular model, but I also do retained search. And currently, my longest running client that I've supported for well over a year at this point,
Wow.
this is retained search. I handle just a couple of really niche roles for them that are
Mm.
very difficult for them to fill on their own. They have internal support that handles their operational roles, their technical roles. I
Right.
handle just a couple of roles for them. And every time I bring somebody on, this is retained search. So we kick off a search. And so there's a fee basis that is based on the eventual salary of the person that they bring on, but I'm paid on an ongoing basis. So there's a lot of ways to structure this. I
Mhm.
also think there's a lot of space to structure on a monthly retainer basis. I haven't done that yet. I think that's
Right.
probably coming, and so while the work I do as an outsourced partner certainly would seem to be in the same vein as agency-based recruiting, I do think of it as something distinct and different. That's probably down to some of my own biases, my own sacred cows about agency space. The way I think of it in my mind, I don't know that I've ever uttered these words out loud, but when people talk about scaling, right? And oh, Aaron, what's your vision for search and rescue? Do you want to, turn it into an agency, bring on a number of other partners, start doing splits and that sort of thing? And I
Mm.
don't like painting myself into a corner. I'm very much a never say never kind of person, but I don't think that that's the right path for me. That's not what I envision.
Mm.
And really, the way I think of it in my mind is this is ultimately a lifestyle business for me. This approach to work supports my preferred approach to life.
Mm.
And I work like this because I want to have agency, not because I want to
Mm.
be an agency.
Mm. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I love that. Um,
Yeah.
just to kind of wrap it up here, I'm just curious. You touched on it a little bit. You've obviously done really well, and you love, just from these last few minutes of talking, we can tell that you love what you do. And I think that's key because there's a lot of hard days, a lot of dry seasons,
Yeah.
and that's great to see. Full transparency, full honesty with the current market, and with the amount of TA professionals that are out there and really really struggling.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
recommend this? Would you recommend this as a plausible path for them?
Yeah.
Would you recommend that,
Sure.
or would you not?
Yeah, I would in certain circumstances. I think that this is a terrific path for somebody who has a really solid foundation from an agency environment where they were full desk and they really know how to dig into business development, and they're ready to get out there and build a book, right?
Mhm.
Or conversely, I think it's a terrific path for someone who's got a really strong, solid foundation as an internal partner and a lot of existing relationships that they can leverage, right? Including perhaps taking on engagements with prior employers, right? That's a great place to start. So, the reason that I say that is uh, I really think that this is a path for seasoned talent acquisition professionals, more so than those who are still quite fresh and in a pretty intense learning phase, because it is different from
Yeah.
probably what they've experienced in their career to date. That's not to say it's
Yeah.
impossible, but um, you know, again, my bias is showing simply because that's how I came into it.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what it does when you have this kind of, partnership model, uh, you're required to have more face time and build stronger relationships internally, and you're kind of
Yeah,
communicating a little bit more, and you're getting into the business with the organization versus kind of the search model where you can kind of just stay on the outskirts, present candidates,
yeah.
and keep yourself at an arm's distance. You really kind of eliminate that barrier with this model, right? Because you're
Hmm.
you're partnering with the team, you're getting to know the culture internally,
Hmm.
even though you're not an internal partner. So
Yeah,
I think it makes a lot of sense that someone with experience and someone who really knows what they're doing to kind of come in. You're almost acting as a consultant, even though you're a service
absolutely.
provider.